Hello everybody, in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars, I take you for a drive in my new, to me, Ferrari 430 Scuderia. Or, if you're a piston header, today on JayEmm on Cars, the finance company has kindly allowed me to borrow their car for a little bit. In either case, this is the first time you'll have seen me driving this car on the channel. I apologise, it's been a little bit longer than I would have liked, but that's just how things have been. And with the 430, I'm trying to continue the trend I started with the 550 of doing things you wouldn't normally associate with your typical Ferrari owner. In truth, there really isn't such a thing as a typical Ferrari owner. I've met quite a few of them now, and each one is a very different person, just like every other brand really. Sure, there are some stereotypes, but that's the same for all walks of life, isn't it? With the 550, I decided to break with tradition and take that car on track the first week I had it. That was probably not the best idea I've ever had, but was fun. It's a nice thing to tell people that you did with your old Ferrari, even though I am still paying for it because I definitely wrecked the brakes with that one. This car, being a 430 Scuderia, is one that is very, very mileage sensitive. In fact, once you take one of these over about 30,000 miles, they are apparently completely unsellable. That's probably why in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, this car's previous owners have hardly ever driven it. And that's precisely why this month alone, I will have covered 2,500 miles. Yup. After picking this car up from Dick Lovett in Swindon, I've brought it all the way to Scotland. And I drove it up here too, 500 miles each way. I drove it up here because I wanted to, and because there are some absolutely sensational roads up here, meaning I should really be able to enjoy this car, and enjoy it I have. There is only one negative thing I really have to say about this car and the experience, and you may be able to hear it throughout the review. You probably hear some knocking. Anyway, when I test drove this car, I reported that the suspension was clonking a little bit. There was a couple of other small issues with the car too. I was told that would be rectified, but it turns out that somebody there decided that it wasn't worth doing, so they chose not to do it. If ever anyone thought that because I am some fancy pants YouTuber who works with Ferrari and therefore I get special treatment, there is your proof that I do not. And if ever you are wondering that because I am some fancy pants YouTuber who has a nice relationship with Ferrari, I'll never say anything bad about them, here is your proof that that's not true. I'm very upset with Dick Lovett about that. I think they were taking the mickey out of me. When I picked this car up, they told me that the suspension knocking was actually the sound of stones hitting the bottom of the car, as if I don't know the difference between a knocking ball joint and stones bouncing off the bottom of the chassis. In either case, they've had their telling off and they are working to put the situation right, so I'm very glad to say that hopefully by the time you see this video, everything will have actually been resolved. But yeah, not happy with that one, because this is a rather expensive car and these things should not happen. I do work to try and promote the Ferrari approved used program, and this has been something of an oversight, but I have a policy of transparency with you all, and I'm very much hoping that the next time I talk to you, I'll be able to say, yep, everything was all sorted and I am able to fully enjoy my car. Not that I haven't been enjoying it at all over the last 1,000 miles. in case you were wondering why I decided to take a car with slightly knocky suspension all the way to Scotland, it was because I wanted to make sure when this car next went into the workshop, anything and everything that was going to work its way loose had done so. In truth, I think a lot of this car's problems are down to the fact that it just hasn't been used. We did actually manage to get this car back into the workshop 48 hours after I picked it up, because I was there for the launch of the Ferrari Portofino M. And so that gave the techs a chance to fix a couple of small issues on the car, and we did actually sort the noise for a little bit, but after another 100 miles or so, something else started to go, and this is just what happens with these cars. When they don't get used, things don't really like it. So I'm giving the car plenty of use now, and we can get everything sorted. So onto the car. What's it like to drive? In a word, sensational. This really is every bit as special as people would have you believe. The regular F430 is a very fine thing indeed, but I never really quite gelled with it. It's just a few little items that just fell short of expectations. The F1 gearbox isn't great. The manuals are very nice, but incredibly expensive, nearly as expensive as one of these. They sit oddly high, so they just look a bit strange. I don't like the standard wheels, and the steering, perhaps worst of all, just lacks that real sense of connection to the road that I really demand in my sporty cars. It's something the 550 has and is very, very good at, and you wouldn't expect it from a car like that. The Scuderia, I'm happy to report, fixes all of those issues and brings with it some extra fun too. Like, for example, this madcap engine and exhaust combo, which are rather good. You may have been able to hear there one of the Scuderia's party pieces. That is its F1 Superfast 2 gearbox system. This is the last single clutch automated manual Ferrari ever made, and with this car they actually got it right. When the conditions are right, the gearbox is up to temperature, your throttle pedal is down more than I think about 60%, and your revs are over a certain point, you get almost instantaneous shifts, like this. Incredible. And for the money of this car, I could have definitely bought something a lot faster. I could have even bought a much faster Ferrari. I could have had a 458. I could have had a 488. That'd have been a hell of a lot quicker. But I bought this car because I wanted the interaction, the drama, the feel of an old analog supercar. And I really do believe the 430 is the last of the analog Ferraris. You have to drive it. Even though it's got the automated manual gearbox, you still need to heel and toe if you really want the best from it. You can downshift with it. It's brilliant. Listen. It's hilarious, this thing. The view out is brilliant. The steering is so communicative. It just bristles with excitement, this car. And this isn't just me saying nice things because I bought the car. In fact, the opposite is always true. I bought the car because I feel this way about it. I'm also very big on sharing my things, and by the time you see this video, about 4 or 5 other people have actually already had a go, and all of them came back with very much glowing reports, including people that I know are used to the ways of the Lotus. So that means they come with very, very high expectations of steering quality, interaction, driver involvement, all of that stuff, and they were very happy and quite surprised with the 430. So the girl's done good so far. The throttle is so responsive. I'd be lying if I said it was the most tuneful car. I don't think it really sings like a Ferrari of old, like a 360, or my personal favourite, the 355. That's just the best sounding car ever. I did give some strong consideration to buying a 355, but believe it or not, I couldn't really afford one of those, and also I just feel like maybe the time's not right for the 355. I hold that car in such high regard. I want to make sure the example I get is absolutely the right one. That's going to take some time, and I'm happy for that to take time too. As you can probably tell, this is a road which isn't particularly well paved. That means it's an excellent test route and also a very demanding test of pretty much any car you might imagine, especially one that's low-slung, hunkered down, riding on stiffer suspension like the Scuderia. Yet it really takes it in its stride. There are several different modes for the little Manatino down here, but by and large I've been using Sport. Some of the documentation I found for this car was a little bit contrarian and would imply that in race mode you get the full bore upshifts and things, and in Sport mode you still get the firmer suspension. Well, you can't engage bumpy road mode in Sport, which is something that was debuted with the Scuderia, and it definitely rides softer in Sport mode than it does in race. But you do get the full throttle upshifts, which are just balmy. Absolutely love them. The gearbox in this is addictive. If I had a Challenge Stradale, which is even more money again than this, I think I'd be really seriously tempted to swap it for a manual box. However, with this, the gearbox is absolutely a part of the car's identity. You can't change that. I would consider changing the exhaust though, because it just doesn't sound great. It's a bit thrashy, it's a bit noisy. It's not a bad noise at all, much more exciting and interesting than a McLaren. And there's a lot of noise too. We did some drive-bys late last evening, which you'll see dotted throughout this video, and when that exhaust valve opens, the noise bounced right off the hills. It did sound really like there's a track day going on around the corner. Absolutely superb. On this car are another highlight. You need to be careful because when they cool down, there is just a little moment when you put your foot down that they need to respond once they warm up. But when they're warm, which is most of the time when you're on a run, they're really quite nice and they respond just like steels. That's the best compliment I can pay them. I am a little bit wary of the front end and the fact that this car is generally quite low. There was one incident when I was out driving the car the other day and it hit the deck and made a horrendous noise, but I'm beginning to suspect that there may have been a rock or something that I just didn't spot on the road, because it hasn't done it since. It is much better in that regard than the Lamborghini Huracan Evo that I drove recently. And honestly, this car is more than quick enough for pretty much every road that I'm ever going to drive it on. It's so good, this thing. I wish it wouldn't knock around so much, but we're going to fix that. At lower speeds, like all F1 boxes, this does need a little bit of help, so you lift off when you're shifting and various things, and it will thank you for it. Reverse is the one you need to be careful with, because that's where your clutch is going to wear the quickest, so you need to be sort of decisive with your inputs. Try not to do what I'm doing now, which is dawdling, but it's generally pretty good. It is a sensational bit of kit, this. Not every Ferrari is as good as you would really hope that they are, but when they're on form, oh my word, they are untouchable, and this does really feel like a car where that was the case. Sure, you can go faster in a McLaren 570S for 100 grand less, but as a piece of engineering, I rather admire this. I also think it's a very pretty thing. It's never been taken with the 570's looks, and it stands over and above a regular F430, and absolutely adore it. It is a real dream car, and it's an utter crime the previous owners just didn't really use it that much. I actually bumped into one of them, and he told me that when Dick Lovett picked it up, he nearly cried. I would. And as ever, because this car hopefully is going to be a feature on the channel for quite some time, I would invite you to tell me or ask me anything you would like about this car, about the ownership experience. I'm trying to be fairly open with this one in terms of numbers and all that stuff where I can. Let me know. But there, as a little road introduction to my 430 Scuderia. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly am. Don't forget to like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll certainly see you again soon. Bye-bye.